Dr. James Watts, a neurosurgeon who performed the first frontal lobotomy, died this week in Washington. If you recall, a lobotomy involves drilling holes in the skull and then inserting and rotating a knife to destroy brain cells. What a genius. He'll be missed.
Norm Macdonald died yesterday, and the internet collectively said, "I didn't even know he was sick," which I think was Norm's parting gift to the world, and we've all gratefully accepted it. I think it's probably the greatest loss to comedy ever, although Norm would probably disagree. He'd say like Farley or Rickles or Rodney probably takes that spot. Not that I know. And besides, he's dead now, so who gives a shit anymore what he has to think? That old chunk of coal. No, I'm kidding. I'd say the only comparable death in recent history is Robin Williams. And, you know, he's a pretty tight contender as well, but I'd say that Norm really could make you bust a gut laughing over completely stupid, irreverent, absurdist things. But Robin made you smile. And I think that's a different kind of joy. And if anyone knows, and in fact the person who taught me, it will be Norm Macdonald, the difference between laughing and smiling. Cue clip, I suppose.
There was a thing I read about Woody Allen, and he went on the stage, and a lot of the people did much better than him. And he was upset, and his manager said, no, it's what you leave on the stage. That was his remark upon Woody Allen. And so I always thought, well, a guy like Andrew Dice Clay would destroy, you know, and have me hitting the wall, as you say, but then afterwards, maybe you'd feel a little queasy. Whereas you kill, and then you leave something nice on the stage. You know, it's one thing to make people laugh, it's another to make people smile.
Wow.
Anyway, I wanted to do, not a tribute, but I've been watching a lot of Norm, obviously. I'd never laughed so much at someone who died the very same day. But Norm's a special case, I suppose. And it's remarkable just how much he's thought about death in the history of his work. A lot of people have talked about, if you listen to, on Spotify, there's an album of his. It's his only stand-up album. It's called Me Doing Stand-Up by Norm Macdonald. And the first two tracks are about death and cancer. So very appropriate. And in the first one, he talks about how it's good to be alive because, you know, it's not good to be dead. That's the most not good thing that there can be. A very Norm statement. And in the second track, he has another very Norm statement. And in fact, this one's been sort of the emblematic quote of the fact that he passed away to cancer. And he says, people say you battle with cancer, but when you die because of cancer, the cancer dies with you. So you don't really lose to the cancer. At best, it's a draw. I think, you know, that's the kind of perspective he had on a lot of things, that sort of mild acceptance, but also a sort of twisted optimism. Another thing I like from that album is when he says to his alcoholic friend, he says, listen, yeah, I mean, you do have a disease, right? Alcoholism is not a disease to be taken lightly, but you did get the best disease. So anyway, I've been watching a lot of Norm, and ultimately my mind turned to his book, which I have in front of me. I read it earlier this year for the first time. And I was hoping for a sequel, or a second book at the very least from Norm. A great fiction writer. You can tell that he really loves Tolstoy and Dostoevsky in just the way he writes about human interactions and about himself. He's very self-deprecating, and he paints himself as a villain in a very Dostoevskian way. So it's a real joy to read. And I found my favorite chapter in this book, which also has probably his best joke ever, the moth joke. If you're unfamiliar with it, I recommend looking it up before I butcher it in the subsequent reading. He said it on Conan, and it's like a 5-minute ramble where he talks about this moth joke. Pause this video, go look it up, search like Conan Moth, and I'm sure you'll find it immediately, because it is a legendary bit that he does. In this particular book, it's not Norm telling the joke, but rather a doctor. And the whole thing is framed inside a bigger narrative. So to give it context, I'm going to read the whole of chapter 23, which is called Make a Wish. And the context to the start of this is that Norm just saw God after a drug overdose, but then he doesn't understand what God said because of his drug overdose. So he just kind of like rambles and stares at God for a bit, and then God leaves him disappointed. And then Norm slowly makes his way back to his hotel room and then, quote, watches Tank Girl 4 times back to back. So that's the context. I'm going to read the whole chapter, and then we're going to get to the moth joke, which is, in my opinion, Norm's best joke. Save, I would say, only rivaled by his Germany joke, which he performed on Letterman's last show. And you can find that on YouTube as well. If you search Norm, Germany, Letterman, you'll probably find exactly that joke. All right. Chapter 23, Make a Wish, from Norm Macdonald's Based on a True Story. Subtitle, Not a Memoir. Adam Egot walks in, sees me watching Tank Girl, and faints. Hey, hang on. Maybe I should do my Norm voice. I don't really have a very good Norm voice. I'm Canadian, so I sound a little bit like Norm either way, but he's got that nasally voice that really sort of, it's hard to do. So, but I'm going to try it anyway, because it's my video and I do whatever the hell I want, and in any case, I think he'd enjoy it. I hope he'd enjoy it. He probably wouldn't enjoy it, but I'll do it all the same. Adam Egot walks in, sees me watching Tank Girl, and faints. I revive him, and he begins jumping up and down and shouting, "You're alive! You're alive!" He tries to hug me, but can't get his arms all the way around due to my girth, so it is only half a hug. I laugh. Ha ha! Yes, Adam Egot, I am alive. I felt this life had nothing left to offer, but I was wrong. Life offers the squeals of delight as you pass a park filled with children. Life offers breakfast with a friend, drinking coffee and laughing at past mistakes. Life offers the kiss of a stranger, unexpected and thrilling. Life offers dilaudid. What a wonderful life I almost tossed away. Adam Egot suddenly becomes serious. Norm, when I thought that you died, I wondered if you were in heaven or the other place. What do you think, Norm? Will we go to heaven? Are we good men? The question stops me cold. I know we are not truly good men, but I cannot tell Adam Egot that. Sure, we're good. We saved a young boy, didn't we? We saved a young boy who the doctors said was beyond saving. I can see Adam Egot is smiling now, and I will need to keep his spirits up, so I remind him of the time we made a young boy's wish come true. It was the end of my first year on SNL, and even if I was never really on the show, just the fact that I was brushing up against it was making me a celebrity. And when you are a celebrity, everyone is always bugging you to do things. Good things. The boy had been alive for 9 years, which made him young, but he would only be alive for 1 more year, which made him old. He was in a sad situation, and he had a wish that he needed my help to realize. It was a simple wish, to meet me and follow me around for a day at the Saturday Night Live TV show. As final wishes go, it seemed like a damn poor one. So that's why I was walking down a dim green hospital corridor that fine cold New York afternoon instead of being where I should have, pitching my hysterical sketch about answering machines to Lorne Michaels for the following Saturday. But there are some things more important than television programs. I knew that dragging a terminally ill child around the studio for a whole day was sure to make me the laughingstock of my coworkers and could potentially get me fired. But sometimes you have to look at the big picture. The truth was, I had not lived an upright life, what with the shoplifting, the adultery, the taking of the Lord's name in vain, the coveting of my neighbor's ox, God damn it, I loved that ox, and the worshipping of the golden calf every time God didn't answer one of my countless prayers. I needed to do something exceptionally selfless to even up the books come Judgment Day and keep me from the devil's grasp for all of eternity. Well, making this boy's wish come true seemed like it just might do the trick. I don't much like hospitals, and I said as much when I met the boy's physician. You may as well know, Doc, I'm no fan of diseases, and I'll never understand filling a whole building with them. What are you, an idiot? Said the doctor. Yeah, I'm an idiot, all right. An idiot just like Alfred Einstein. I'll have you know that I'm Norm Macdonald, and I work on that there Saturday Night Live TV show, and I am a big shot. Saturday Night Live? That show hasn't been funny since Bill Murray left. A crowd was beginning to form, which was perfect for me since I was a stand-up comedian. I decided I would put this doctor in his place. If you think it's so easy being funny, Doc, and why don't you tell us all a joke? And so he did, and it was one of the funniest jokes I'd ever heard. I'll never forget it. His timing was flawless. A moth goes into the podiatrist's office, and the podiatrist says, "What's the problem?" And the moth says, "Where do I begin with my problems? Every day I go to work for Gregory Vasilovich, and all day long I toil. But what is my work? I'm a bureaucrat, and so every day I joylessly move papers from one place to another and then back again. I no longer know what it is that I actually do, and I don't even know if Gregory Vasilovich knows. He only knows that he has power over me, and this seems to bring him much happiness. And where is my happiness? It is when I awake in the morning and I do not know who I am. In that single moment I am happy. In that single moment before the memory of who I am strikes me like a cane, and I take to the streets and walk in a malaise here and then there and then here again. And then it is time for work. Others stopped asking me what I do for a living long ago, for they know I will have no answer and will fix my empty eyes upon them. And they fear my melancholia might be so deep as to be contagious. Sometimes, Doc, in the deepest dark of night, I awake in my bed, and I turn to my right, and with horror I see some old lady lying on my arm, an old lady that I once loved, Doc, in whose flesh I once found splendor, and now see only decay. An old lady who insults me by her very existence. Once, Doc, when I was young, I flew into a spider web and was trapped. In my panic, I smashed my wings till the dust flew from them, but it did not free me, and only alerted the spider. The spider moved toward me, and I became still, and the spider stopped. I had heard many stories from my elders about spiders, about how they would sink their fangs into your cephalothorax, and you would be paralyzed, but aware, as the spider slowly devoured you. So I remained as still as possible. But when the spider again began moving toward me, I smashed my wing again into my cage of silk, and this time it worked. I cut into the web and freed myself and flew skyward. I was free and filled with joy, but this joy soon turned to horror. I looked down and saw that in my escape I had taken with me a single strand of silk, and at the end of the strand was the spider, who was scrambling upward toward me. Was I to die high in the sky, where no spider should be? I flew this way, and then that, and finally I freed myself from the strand, and watched as it floated earthward with the spider. But days later, a strange feeling descended upon my soul. Doc, I began to feel that my life was that single strand of silk, with a deadly spider racing up it and toward me, and I felt that I had already been bitten by his venomous fangs, and that I was living in a state of paralysis as life devoured me whole. my daughter, Alexandria, fell to the cold of last winter. The cold took her, as it did many of us, and so my family mourned, and I placed on my countenance the look of grief, Doc, but it was a masquerade. I felt no grief for my dead daughter, but only envy. And so I have one child now, a boy, whose name is Stepan Mikhailovich Smokovnikov. And I tell you now, Doc, with great and deep shame, the terrible truth. I no longer love him. When I look into his eyes, all I see is the same cowardice that I see when I catch a glimpse of my own eyes in a mirror. And it's this cowardice that keeps me living, Doc, that keeps me moving from place to place, saying hello and goodbye, eating though hunger has long left me, walking without destination, and at night, lying beside that strange old lady in this burlesque of a life I endure. If only the cowardice would abate for the time needed to reach over and pick up the cocked and loaded pistol that lies on my bedside table, then I might finally end this facade once and for all. But alas, the cowardice takes no breaks. It is what defines me. It is what frames my life. It is what I am. And yet I cannot resign myself to my own life. Instead, despair is my constant companion as I walk here and then there, without dreams, without hope, and without love. "Moth," says the podiatrist, "your tale has moved me, and it is clear you need help. But it is help I cannot provide. You must see a psychiatrist and tell him of your troubles. Why on earth did you come to my office?" And the moth says, "Well, because the light was on." The brilliant moth joke from Norm Macdonald. Let's get back to the rest of the chapter. By the end of the joke, everyone around was laughing hard, and I started to laugh too in spite of myself. But then I got angry because I realized that he was making me look small. So I took a swing at him, but I missed by a good foot or so, and ended up knocking over an old man who was pushing some futuristic contraption that rolled on wheels and was attached to his right arm by a thin tube. I bent down to apologize because I felt that the accident was partially my fault, and that's when the doctor kicked me heavy in the ribs. "Hey, I can mend him, but I can bust him up too," he said, and that got another big laugh. Everybody thinks they're a comedian, especially in my line of work. I lay there gasping as the doctor recounted a few hilarious anecdotes, and once the laughing crowd dispersed, he started telling me about the boy I was visiting and his illness. He used a lot of big words. He was still clearly determined to make me look small. So I interrupted him. Okay, I get the idea, Doc. You went to school. I only got one question for you. This thing he's got, is it contagious?" "No, it's not contagious," he said softly. He looked me in the eye and shook his head at me, all sad and weary. "He's just a poor brave child who hasn't got much time." I noticed a tear as it made its way down his cheek. He wasn't such a tough guy anymore, or so funny either. That's what separates professional funny men like me from bums like that doctor. I crashed into the boy's room with a big smile on my face. Around his bed, nurses and orderlies and a couple of doctors gathered, and they all held clipboards and looked solemn. Death is a funny thing. Not funny ha-ha like a Woody Allen movie, but funny strange like a Woody Allen marriage. When it's unexpected, the death comes fast like a ravenous wolf and tears open your throat with a merciful fury. But when it's expected, well, it comes slow and patient, like a snake. And the doctor tells you how far away it is, and when exactly it'll be at your door, and when it'll be at the foot of your bed, and when it'll be on your flesh. It's all right there on their clipboards. The room was filled with all kinds of whirring and beeping and dinging. "Hey, would somebody turn that doggone noise down?" I shouted. Of course, I knew that those noises were coming from machines that they were using to keep the boy alive. But I also knew I had to make a big entrance, and I didn't want to disappoint. Only the boy laughed, which was fine with me because he was the most important one there, besides me. I told everybody to scram so I could have a word with the boy alone. "Hey, how you feeling, son?"
How do you think I'm feeling, Einstein?
I was genuinely touched that the boy knew I was considered a genius at Saturday Night Live. He had clearly done his research. But his comment also reminded me that I had to get back to Rockefeller Center and convince Lorne to put my answering machine sketch on the air that week. "Well, see you later, kid. Just wanted to let you know I'm happy to make your wish come true before you...
Do you swear to God you'll make my wish come true, Norm?
I don't think that would be such a good idea."
Look at me, Norm.
I couldn't help but comply, and as I looked at the boy, a curious tenderness overtook me. "Yeah, I swear to God,"
Good,
the boy said.
because I have a very different wish.
Hey, please don't tell me I have to take you to the show for 2 days.
I don't want to go to the show at all. It hasn't been funny since Bill Murray left.
Well, why'd you choose me then?
Because you are a Canadian citizen.
I was confused. "Son, I do not understand. What is your wish, and what does anything have to do with me being Canadian?" The boy looked at me directly, and I could see tears fill his eyes. He spoke softly, his voice quavering and unsteady.
I want to kill a baby seal.
And that's the chapter, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, absurdist humor that you just can't help but laugh at. A special kind of comedian. A comedian's comedian, they call him, or a comic's comic, I think is the technical jargon. But that assumes that the lay comedian, us average folk, have no understanding of his sort of comedy, but that's exactly the opposite, isn't it? He's the kind of person that can make anybody laugh, and so he's not a comedian's comedian at all. He just happens to be everyone's comedian. And in the kind of way where you don't ever really assume that he's making jokes for anyone except himself. And so ultimately, he's not anyone's comedian, he's just his own. It's the kind of comedy where you couldn't help but be inspired by it because it just made you want to see what made yourself laugh and say those things, not for the purpose of making anyone else laugh, but just to make the world a little bit funnier for yourself. Living in your own jokes. That's what Norm's comedy was about. He just liked to invite us in. What a genius. He'll be missed.